Hey everybody, welcome to Board Game Heaven. My name is Raymond, and in this video I'm taking a look at Ecosystem by Matt Simpson, published by Genius Games. This is a card drafting and laying game for 2 to 6 players, which plays in about 15 to 20 minutes for ages 10 and up. And before I start explaining how to play the game and share my thoughts, I'd like to ask you to please hit that subscribe button if you haven't subscribed already. It really helps the channel. Please also check out my Patreon page by clicking the link in the description below. Patrons of my channel get early access to all of my videos, your name in the credits, and access to some Patreon exclusive content every month as well. And you also save up for the Board Game Heaven enamel pin. With that out of the way, let's check out the game. To start the game, you simply take all of the ecosystem cards and give that a good shuffle, and then deal 10 cards to each player that's playing, and then give every player one of these scoring cards as well. These cards will have all of the cards explained on them and how they score points, and also your diversity scoring, which I will explain at the end of this video. The rest of the cards are set aside until round 2, so you simply take your hand of cards and you take a look at them, and there's going to be all kinds of different cards in here. All the cards again are on this leaflet, and you will decide which card you are going to keep and then place in your own ecosystem, because you will be forming a grid of 5 by 4 cards on the table. And after every player has chosen a card, so let's say I want to keep maybe the bees, I want to keep that, you just put that face down on the table until everybody has chosen, and then you pass those cards around in clockwise order. So that player is getting these remaining 9 cards, that player is getting these, and I am getting these. So then all players reveal the card that they picked, and you just put it on the table in front of you. Of course, at the start, the first card doesn't matter, because you will be building that grid surrounding that card. So you take a look at the next cards again, and you will be picking another card. So maybe I want the bear to combine with the bees, and I pick that one. And again, every player just picks a card and passes on the cards that remain again to the player on their left. And then you simultaneously flip over the card you picked and put it on your grid. And new cards always need to be placed adjacent to a card that's already on the table. So I can't put it somewhere else thinking I'll form the grid later. It has to be orthogonally adjacent to the card I already played. So diagonally is not adjacent. And of course, once you've made a row that is 5 wide or a column that's 4 high, then you can't go beyond that, of course, because this has now set the borders of my ecosystem. And so maybe at the end of the first round, my ecosystem will look something like this. I'll still have room for a card either to the left or the right, and another card either to the bottom or the top of my ecosystem, because I haven't made a 5 wide row or a 4 high column yet. So after everybody has placed their 10th card, you take the remaining card and you deal out 10 cards once again to each player. And once again, the remaining cards are simply removed. So you take a look at your cards again, and you do the exact same thing you did in the first round. So you pick a card that you want to keep, and then you put that face down on the table, but this time you pass your cards counterclockwise. So every player again picks a card, and then counterclockwise you pass along those remaining cards, and then everybody reveals their chosen card and places it in their ecosystem. So maybe I'm going to place that one over here. keep my options open, and I take a look at the other hand that was passed to me. And of course, during these rounds, you're trying to remember the cards that are in these hands, because they will be coming back to you depending on the number of players you play, but it plays up to 6 and you've got 10 cards, so it'll always come back at least a couple of times. And you're also going to be paying attention to what the other players are doing, because certain cards will score points for having the most of them. So let's have a look at all of these cards and how they score. So for example, here the bear scores 2 points for each adjacent bee or trout. So if you have the trout or the bees next to a bear, you get 2 points for each of those cards. The bee gets 3 points for each adjacent meadow, which looks like this. The meadow gets you points for making it bigger. So connected meadows, again orthogonally connected, score a number of points depending on the number of cards that are connected. Here the trout scores 2 points for each adjacent dragonfly because it eats them, and stream because that's where it lives. The eagle gets 2 points for each trout and rabbit within 2 spaces. So that one can be 2 spaces away or even diagonally adjacent, because that's 1-2 spots away as well. The rabbit simply scores 1 point and you can place it anywhere, but once you play it, you can immediately switch the locations of 2 cards, including the rabbit of course, but you probably want to swap out to other cards to try and optimize your score. The dragonfly gets points for the total size of adjacent streams. So you could have multiple streams adjacent to the dragonfly and just add up the number of streams that are adjacent to it, and you just score that many points. The fox gets 3 points if it's not adjacent to wolves or bears. The deer gets 2 points for each row and column containing at least 1 deer. So you kind of want to spread these out diagonally, because then they will score 2 points for both the column and the row they're in. And if there's a deer here, that's another column and row that it'll score. So that's 4 points for that deer in a column and a row. The stream, that's one of those cards that gets you points if you have the largest. So the largest connected stream, again orthogonally, will score 8 points to the player who has the biggest stream, 5 points for the second largest stream that a player has, and all the other players don't score points for streams. And finally there's the wolves. The player with the most wolves scores 12 points, second most 8, and the third most 4, and any other players that have less than the first 3 don't score points. Now if you have a tie for these cards, then the tied players get the maximum points and the second largest gets none. Then there's diversity scoring here, which has gaps, as you see here. Basically, when you take your scoring pad, so let me grab my scoring pad from a previous game here, you start scoring all of these cards and you write them down, and some cards will not score points for you, so you just put in a nil or a dash or whatever you want. So you know that those cards, they might be in your ecosystem or they simply might not be in your ecosystem, but anyway, they don't score points. Then at the end you check how many of those zeros you have, and those are your gaps. So if you have less or equal to 2 cards that did not score points for you, you still get 12 points. If there's 3, you get 7, 4, you get 3. But if you have 5 gaps, so that's 5 cards that did not score for you, you get 0 extra points. And if it's more, you actually lose points. So you simply add up all of those points for all of those cards. Here's the diversity scoring. You add them up, and the player with the highest score, of course, wins the game. So my final thoughts on Ecosystem by Genius Games. Let's start with the components. It's basically just a whole bunch of cards. You get a whole stack of smallish cards which have these beautiful illustrations on them and nothing more. It's just an illustration of an animal or the meadow or the brook. And that's it. So you get to enjoy the full art. There's no text, there's nothing else on it. You just need to know how they score, and that's all explained on this single card. It's also got the ecosystem on the back, which is really lovely, just like on the cover of the box. And you just have those 11 different cards. It also says on here how many times every card is in the game, which of course doesn't mean that they are actually in a game that you play, because there's many cards, and when you're playing less than 6 players, you might not even see certain cards. But it says here how many are in the game, so that kind of gives you the odds of finding that card. And of course, after a first round of passing all the cards to draft what you want, you know what's in that round, and you do that twice. And all of their abilities, their scoring, is explained on this single thing. So that's all you need. And you also get a little notepad for keeping score at the end of the game, which is very handy. There's no pen or pencil, but everybody has that lying around, of course. You got the small rule book, and everything fits nicely in a very small, compact little box. So that's good as well. The artwork, like I already mentioned, is absolutely beautiful. I love it. I love that these cards have just the art on them and nothing more. That is really nice and quite different from what you're used to from other games. There's always something else on the cards, but here you just have the art, and it's absolutely lovely. The theme is nice. You're literally building an ecosystem by, putting animals next to a meadow or a river or close to other animals that they might hunt, and you're trying to build it in a way that you score as many points as possible, because you want to have a big biodiversity as well, because that also gets you points if you have all 13 different cards in there and they all score. You're doing very well, but you can have up to 2 cards that either aren't in your grid or don't score, and you'll still have the maximum points, but you can have more gaps, of course, then you'll have less points. So thematically, that works really nicely. I think that's very clever. The gameplay is simple and fun. You just draft 2 times. You start with 10 cards, you pass them along, you pick your cards, and you remember what's in that hand before you pass them along. And then once you've seen all the hands, you know what's basically available, if you manage to remember all that, of course. But then you can form your strategy. You can think, okay, I've seen this, I've seen that, I'm gonna try and get as many of these as I can. Maybe you want the deer to be in your grid a lot, so you can score points for that. Maybe you want a number of bears, or maybe you want to make a big meadow or a long brook. And all of that is basically something you try and figure out as you get new hands. You're thinking, okay, I've seen this a lot, so maybe I should try and get more of those. Hopefully this card will come back to me. And otherwise, just putting them down in your grid in a optimal way. That's kind of the puzzle that you're making. You're putting them down and you're thinking, okay, I'm gonna leave some room here so I can put this animal there. Maybe you have a brook and you want to put the trout next to it. Maybe you have the bear fishing for those trout. And that's just a fun little puzzle. And as soon as you have, of course, the 5x4 grid, that's the limits of your ecosystem. So then it gets easier because there's less choices. The cards that you can draft get less and less, and the room you have is less and less. So it gets quicker as you go and easier as you go towards the end. But you're trying to optimize it. And it's fun that the rabbit just scores 1 point, but lets you swap 2 cards around. So if you think, well, I could actually score more points if I put this creature there and this animal there, then the rabbit lets you do that. And maybe you just have a spot left at the end of the game and you're like, well, I can't really score anything more here. So if I find that rabbit, I'm going to use that and put that there and then swap these 2 around and score some more points. And you're also, of course, paying attention to what the other players are doing. You're looking at their tableau and thinking, okay, he's going to go for that. And they've got a lot of wolves. Can I beat them? No, so I shouldn't focus on wolves too much. Maybe I want to try and get this. And that's just a lot of fun. You're trying to make your ecosystem as thriving as possible while also keeping an eye on what other players are doing and also trying to remember the cards that are going around. So I think that's a really pretty simple but challenging drafting game, a very pure drafting game, if you will. The replayability is pretty good. It's, you know, it's as fun as you find the game. You can replay it many times, of course, or maybe you just play it once as a filler and you take it out another game night, put it back on the shelf. But since it's a relatively fast game, I feel the replayability for one evening is already there. You know, it doesn't overstay its welcome, so I would happily play this twice in a row. And you can, you know, put it away and then it's fun. So you'll likely want to replay it. Again, it's one of those games that is replayable for as long as you enjoy it, and then you'll probably pass it on maybe. And finally, there's the language dependency. So other than the reference card, which of course explains the scoring, and the rule book itself, which also has that explained, there's no text on the cards. Like I said, the cards are just art. So if you manage to remember how things score, or maybe you can just read these few English lines that are on the card, that's really all you need, then the game can be considered to be language independent. But there is, of course, this. So it's not fully language independent. You do need to understand what's on this card, but you can easily explain that, I guess, if one of you speaks English, if the owner of the game has it, and you're playing this with non-English speaking people, then just explain this or write it down what it means. This is all you need, and otherwise you can play the game fully language independently. So in the end, this is quite a fun card drafting and, you know, grid building game, and it plays 2 to 6 players, so that's for a lot of groups. That's a lot of fun as well, and it's just beautiful. The art is absolutely lovely. So I really like this game, definitely giving that a thumbs up. And if you enjoyed this video, please also give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and please check out my Patreon page if you'd like to support what I do by clicking the link in the description below or the Patreon icon at the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time on Board Game Heaven.